Ah, my favorite crowd, the overlooked, the underestimated, the written off, the ones whispered about in hushed tones behind courtroom doors, where they swore you'd never rise. They never pictured you as the one who would catch every detail, fight with surgical precision, and flip the system upside down. And they certainly never expected you to win like this, because let's be honest, you didn't just win, you detonated. You didn't play fair, you played flawless. And when the verdict was read, no one said, "Unbelievable." Instead they muttered, "Wait, is this even legal?" The truth is, you weaponized silence. You let them laugh while you quietly loaded the evidence. You let them dance while you memorized every lie. You let them circle your name on a lawsuit, all while you were etching theirs into history. They forged papers, but you forged destiny. They hired lawyers, but you relied on God's patience. They came with tricks, traps and testimonies. You came with that nuclear silence that carried more weight than any argument. Silence that whispered, "I don't need to speak. The results will scream for me." And when the judge's gavel finally dropped, it wasn't justice that echoed through the room. It was panic. Because you didn't just win, you humiliated them, in the very language they thought you could never master. Now they're calling in the feds, not because you broke the law, but because you revealed how much of it was always standing on your side. They can't figure out how you did it. You were supposed to fold, to cry, to go broke, or at best settle for scraps. But instead you walked in with no expression, and you walked out with everything: the money, the title, the inheritance, and most importantly their guilt, publicly signed, sealed and broadcast for all to see. You see, there are victories, and then there are this ain't even legal victories. The kind that make attorneys drop their pens mid-sentence. The kind that force news outlets to rewrite their headlines overnight. The kind that make even your enemies shake their heads and say, "Yo, that was insane." You didn't just beat them, you became the warning label. The example etched into future cases is the one they'll never forget. Because from now on, every time someone tries to play dirty, your name will thunder through their minds like a storm. And if anyone doubts it, all they have to do is remember what happened the last time someone tried you. Yeah, let's just say they don't want to end up like them. You flipped the entire bloodline upside down. You shattered a family legacy that was built on nothing but lies. And in the process, you embarrassed every cousin who conspired in those secret WhatsApp group chats. Now even the ancestors, the ones who watched in silence, are standing up and clapping. But here's the part that feels almost illegal. You weren't supposed to wake up. You weren't supposed to evolve, to pierce through the illusions, to understand the system, let alone bend it until it became your weapon. And yet look at you now, walking out of court in a clean suit, face unreadable, as if nothing just happened, while behind you the entire building still smolders from the fire you set with the truth. They thought they had you cornered with affidavits, gaslighting tactics and fake witnesses, but you didn't just push back, you made the walls melt. They tried to erase your name from your own bloodline, but you hijacked their script, rewrote it, and signed the ending with your own fingerprint. Now the entire room has gone cold, the air feels heavy, and even the judge stares at the verdict in disbelief, whispering, "Did we just watch them turn a felony into a family case?" You didn't need backup, you didn't need pity, you needed one clean shot. And when the opportunity came, you took it so flawlessly that they swore you hacked the courtroom itself. They called you dramatic, emotional, reactive. But the truth, you were calculating. Every reaction they mocked was part of the plan. And now, look at them reacting in chaos, calling lawyers at midnight, deleting texts they can't afford to keep, updating their resumes like fugitives on the run. You didn't just claim an inheritance. You turned the entire inheritance into an indictment. They whispered, "They'll never survive this." You whispered back, "Bet." They laughed. You studied. They testified. You waited. And when your turn came, you didn't just speak. You brought hell itself into the courtroom, the scariest part. You didn't need to scream. You didn't gloat. You didn't even blink, because you already knew how this story would end. They panicked, calling the feds, but what they failed to realize is that now you are the feds, and every time their phone rings they flinch, not knowing if it's a lawyer, a banker, a judge, or karma itself wearing a badge. When you strike with precision, clean, cold-blooded, calculated, you don't just win a case, you shatter their entire nervous system. They can't sleep, they can't eat, they don't even talk in those family group chats anymore. Instead, they whisper in secret DMs, deleting messages like digital smoke signals that will somehow save them. But it's too late. They thought it was about money. They thought you were fighting for the inheritance. But no, you were fighting for memory, for truth, for every lie they tried to stitch into the fabric of your legacy. And in broad daylight, in front of the whole courtroom, you ripped it out vein by vein, until there was nothing left but their shame. They once said, you were crazy. Now they're the ones Googling at 3 a.m. Can you go to jail for lying in probate court? You gave them something worse than a sentence. You gave them a reputation, because what stings more than losing money is losing the illusion. They wanted to be seen as saints. You turned them into suspects. They wanted to wear the crown of heirs. You turned them into punchlines and memes. They expected to see handcuffs on you. Now, every time they glance at their own wrists, they feel the phantom burn of chains that haven't even clicked shut yet. And let me tell you something about people who treat courtrooms like casinos. They gambled on your pain, expecting you to fold quietly and disappear. But you didn't fold. You went all in. And when the cards hit the table, the entire pot exploded right in their lap. Now even the attorneys who once smirked are staring at your case file, whispering, what kind of genius lunatic built this masterpiece? You line the facts up with precision, like dominoes placed in perfect order, and then with one flick of truth, you watch them collapse in real time. You weren't the victim in this game, you were the trap, the razor hidden behind the smile, the joker in a deck they thought had rules. They thought they were teaching you a lesson, but instead, you delivered them a criminal record wrapped in humiliation. They wanted you broken, but now they're the ones broken in ways money can't fix, haunted by public disgrace, private guilt, family shame, and the eternal echo of your name carved into courtroom transcripts. You didn't come to play their game, you came to dismantle it. You came to show the system what happens when one underestimated mind stops running, turns around, and begins writing new laws and fire. Now every time they hear the word inheritance, they twitch. Every time a gavel cracks, they flinch, remembering how your silence thundered louder than their screams. Every time they check the mailbox, their stomach drops, praying it's not another subpoena with your name attached. They wanted to shrink you, to keep you small, but you proved one terrifying truth. Once the silent ones start learning, they stop losing, and now they're afraid. Not because you shouted, not because you raged, but because you were calm, collected, precise, and because you were right. You had receipts. You walked in with poise, and you walked out with power, and as you left, the entire courthouse whispered the same thing. Who the hell let them cook like that? Because what you did wasn't normal. By their crooked standards, it wasn't even legal, but by your standards, it was legendary. You didn't just win, you rewrote the game. Now they fumble through their dusty rule books, trying to make sense of what happened, while you enjoy the spoils of victory. You're no longer just a winner, you're a myth. In those courtrooms, your name isn't spoken anymore. It's whispered like a curse, like an invocation. They're terrified that saying it too loud will summon the same storm that nearly destroyed them. Because what you delivered wasn't justice, it was theatrical revenge executed with surgical calm. Now every lawyer in that city has a cautionary tale that ends with the same warning, and that's why you never underestimate someone who only wanted peace. You didn't bring peace, you brought balance. and you brought it like a wrecking ball dipped in silence. To them you're no longer a person, you've become a case study, a fable, the very reason shady cousins hire lawyers before even thinking about a will. You showed them exactly what happens when the underestimated finally say, bet, not loud, not petty, not flashy, just cold, accurate, inevitable. You left no fingerprints, but you left scars. You didn't break the law, you broke their entire understanding of what's possible. When intelligence finally snaps into action, now they're warning their children not to be greedy. They're rewriting their wills, praying to their lawyers, deleting old emails, and sweating over decisions they made 6 years ago. You changed the climate itself. You turned probate court into a crime scene with air conditioning. Every time they walk into that building now, a chill runs through them, not because you're in the room, but because your legacy still lingers like smoke after a fire. You made the system blink first. You cracked it open like a ribcage and made it sing your victory song, and the best part, you didn't even flex, you just vanished. Case closed. Record set. Silence. Deafening. And now, every time they check the news, every time they scan their bank statements, every time they look up at the sky, they wonder if you're about to descend again, another lawsuit tucked in your pocket, like a Molotov cocktail waiting to be lit. You scarred them without lifting a weapon, without raising your voice, and without letting rage consume you. The wound you left wasn't physical, it was carved with proof, with the undeniable reality that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous alive. You didn't just flip their narrative, you buried it and replaced it with your own origin story. A story that declares a universal law: play stupid games, and one day someone will study the entire legal code just to break you legally, and do it with a smile. They mocked you. They plotted against you. They imagined you crawling into court on your knees. But you didn't arrive broken. You arrived armored in vengeance, with God on your left, logic on your right, and every ounce of pain they ever tried to give you transformed into pure leverage. You became their worst nightmare, a calm, brilliant, unshakable version of yourself, the kind of energy that doesn't politely knock at the door, but kicks it in and sues for emotional damages on the way in. Now you're not just a story, you're folklore, a glitch in their bloodline, a spiritual debt collector that no prayer can erase. You were once labeled the black sheep, the outcast, but now you stand as the grim reaper in a tailored suit, carrying legal documents instead of a scythe. And that's why this wasn't just a win, it was a warning, a declaration to every single person who ever underestimated you. I was quiet, not weak. I was patient, not passive. And now I'm not just alive, I'm the reason you're paranoid. Because here's the truth, you don't even have to speak anymore. Your silence is its own language. Your stillness is its own threat. Your absence is its own presence. You could walk into a room, say nothing, and those who betrayed you would start confessing to crimes you didn't even know about. That's what happens when you win too hard. You don't just beat them, you burn a memory into their nervous system. Now their hands shake when they sign paperwork. Their voices crack when they force out the words, "We're family," because deep down, they know. Every lie they ever engineered is now archived in a courthouse file, stamped with your name, highlighted, embossed, and eternal. You've become the ghost that lingers in every group chat, the phantom at every dinner table, the shadow that turns family reunions into crime scenes disguised with catering. You are the curse they can't shake, the storm they can't outrun. They talk about forgiveness like it's an option, but they know better. Because what they lost wasn't just money, it wasn't just credibility. They lost the right to speak your name. They lost access. They lost you. And now your silence itself has become sacred, a holy warning etched into their conscience. Because the last time you spoke, the courtroom collapsed. The last time you acted, the inheritance chain snapped like a brittle twig. The last time you smiled, 4 cousins fainted on the spot, and one lawyer retired. Without notice, as if that grin itself had filed his resignation papers. That smile wasn't just an expression, it was a verdict. It was the kind of smile that carried the weight of every courtroom win. Every betrayal turned into evidence, every lie turned into leverage. And the streets, oh the streets, remember, they still carry your story in whispers passed down like folklore, like an urban legend etched in the cracks of concrete. Yeah bro, they tried to play him, wrote him out of the will, tried to gaslight him, thought they had him cornered. Now half the family's broke, and the other half's in therapy trying to process what happened. You went from being that one relative they dismissed, the one they thought would fold quietly, to becoming a case study in divine retaliation. Professors could teach entire lectures on how you turned pain into precedent. Judges could cite your composure as the reason chaos has a new definition. And the truth is, they deserve every ounce of what they're living now, every sleepless night, every fake smile across a dinner table, every awkward silence choking the air at brunch, because you gave them chances, so many chances to choose decency, to choose unity, to make it right. But they bet against you, and when you collect on those bets, it's not money that accrues interest, it's fear. Now the paranoia bleeds into their daily lives. Every time something goes wrong, your shadow is the first thing they see. That job rejection that came without explanation, was it you? That sudden audit knocking at their door, did you engineer it? That scam subpoena they got in the mail, was that your handiwork, just to remind them you're everywhere? They don't know. And that's the part that keeps them trembling, because once you become a myth, you don't even have to act anymore. Your reputation does the haunting for you. They should have chosen peace. They should have chosen family. They should have chosen forgiveness. But instead they chose war. And when they opened that door, you didn't just step through. You burned the hinges so it could never close again. You didn't just win. You immortalized the battle. You turned the battlefield into a museum, curated with their failures, framed with their signatures, preserved in court transcripts like exhibits no one can erase. And now children are growing up hearing the story, like bedtime warnings. Don't lie in court, or you'll end up like Uncle so-and-so. Or don't underestimate the quiet ones. They'll joker your whole bloodline. You didn't just seek revenge, you redefined it. You elevated it. You turned destruction into elegance and made retaliation into an art form. And you did it with one terrifying gift, a mind sharpened by betrayal and a soul that refused to kneel beneath their boots. They thought they were playing chess. They thought they were pulling strings. But you weren't even on the board anymore. You were the fire that reduced the board to ashes. Now you are free. Free not just from them, but from the weaker version of yourself who once allowed them to sleep peacefully. You're not fighting anymore. You're floating above it all, untouchable, and they're trapped in an endless loop of what-ifs. What if you come back? What if you walk in one more time? What if you uncover another lie they buried deep? What if you're not finished yet? Those questions rot them from the inside out, corroding their confidence, their sleep, their peace. And you won't answer. You'll let the silence work like poison, slow and unrelenting, interest compounding on a debt they never should have created. Because at this point, it's not about revenge. Revenge was child's play. Courtrooms, paperwork, exposing lies, those were just warm-ups. Moves you executed with surgical calm, with fire in your veins, with that grin they still see in their nightmares. What you're living now goes beyond vengeance. This is ascension. This is transcendence. You're no longer slogging in the mud with mortals clawing for scraps of justice. You're not in the war anymore. You became the war. You embodied it, owned it, and ended it so violently, so completely, that even the universe itself whispered, "Let them pass. They've suffered enough. Now it's the rest of the world's turn to feel it." And here's the truth. You're not a person to them anymore. You're a presence, a phantom, a living verdict. You're the reason fresh attorneys double and triple check every line of paperwork before submitting it. You're the reason courtroom interns go pale when they stumble across your name in an old case file, like they've just found a ghost folded into the records. You're not a chapter, they study you like a doctrine. You're not a file, you're the warning label taped to the outside of the system. You made the courthouse itself tremble. You made the system blink first, and now every time they hear your name whispered, every time they pass that building, every time they touch a pen to sign another document, they remember the day the courtroom collapsed under your silence. And the best part, you didn't even flex. You didn't scream. You didn't gloat. You smiled, and that smile alone was enough to turn your enemies into legends of caution, while you walked away free, untouchable, unforgettable, unstoppable. You're the reason betrayal doesn't feel casual anymore. Before you, backstabbing was just another family sport. Cheap words behind closed doors, whispered lies at dinner tables, forged signatures hidden in dusty envelopes. But you shattered that illusion. You turned treachery into a warning sign. You made betrayal feel radioactive, dangerous to even attempt. Because now there's living proof that some people can take your cruelty, your sins, your attempts to erase them, and turn it into their superpower. And you, more than anyone, did it flawlessly. You didn't just survive what they threw. You turned every blow into momentum, every insult into fuel, every scar into a crown. And the part that truly terrifies them, it's not what you did, it's what you didn't do. You didn't gloat. You didn't expose them online for cheap likes. You didn't scream through megaphones, "I told you so." You vanished into success. You disappeared into silence. And that silence burns worse than any insult ever could. Because silence is heavy. Silence is suffocating. Silence forces their imagination to work overtime, painting scenarios of your victories in colors far more vivid than reality. They don't get to witness your downfall. They don't get the joy of your failure. They don't even get to track your movements anymore. All they know, all they can cling to, is this unshakable truth. You walked away with everything. They're left clutching nothing. And the cruelest twist, the one they mocked, doubted, and dismissed, was the one who took it all. Now your name doesn't live in their mouths as fame. It lives there as fear. You've become their private apocalypse, a silent storm that rattles their bones every time they think back to how wrong they were about you. You are the unhealed wound, the scar that throbs whenever they try to pretend life has gone back to normal. And what's even more devastating for them, you've become inspiration. Strangers, people who don't even know your full story, feel something when they hear about you. They catch a chill when your silence is mentioned. They lean forward when your legend is whispered, because you've transcended being a person. You've become a symbol, a blueprint, a warning etched into the subconscious of anyone who underestimates the wrong soul. And the sickest part, your story will never be told in full. It can't be. It's too layered, too surreal, too divine. What you did wasn't just human. It was something else entirely. It was divine retribution, dressed in flesh, justice wearing a joker's grin, karma delivered in real time with a pen and a smile. You mastered a truth most people can't even face, that sometimes the most godlike act isn't to shout or to strike or to seek applause. Sometimes the most divine thing you can do is walk away with everything and say nothing. That is transcendence. That is ascension. You've moved beyond courtrooms, beyond battlefields, beyond the bloodline drama that once tried to cage you. You don't sit at their table anymore. You sit above it all, untouchable, unreadable, undeniable. They can't reach you. They can't understand you. They can't predict you. They can only watch from a trembling distance, flinching every time your name echoes through the halls of their memory. Because you didn't just become successful, you became sacred. Not sacred like mercy, not sacred like gentle forgiveness, sacred like fire, sacred like thunder, sacred like proof Proof that the underestimated one, the outcast, the silent genius, the scapegoat, the family black sheep, the one mocked behind closed doors, was always the god in the room. They thought they were erasing you from a will, but you revealed yourself as something greater, not an heir but a force of will. They came with forged documents. You came with destiny. They came with lies. You came with law. They wanted to erase your existence, but in trying, they stained their own legacy forever. You didn't just win, you rewrote existence. You reshaped the blueprint of possibility. You proved that silence is louder than screams, that patience is sharper than blades, that dignity is deadlier than violence. And now, you're no longer playing roles. You're beyond villain, beyond hero, beyond revenge. You're something rarer, something eternal. You've stepped into the realm of legend, and legends do not explain. Legends do not revisit. Legends do not come back to argue or justify. Legends stand unreachable, unshakable, unapologetic. They endure, they haunt, they inspire. That's what you are now, a presence stitched into memory, a myth carved into family folklore, a shadow that bends systems and whispers through generations. Your silence became scripture, your victory became prophecy. You are not their downfall, you are their doctrine, and the doctrine is simple. Never underestimate the silent one. You were the one who burned their entire bloodline's lies into ash, and you never once looked back. You didn't stop to sift through the rubble. You didn't stand on the ruins for applause. You didn't wave a flag of victory or demand recognition. No, you disappeared. You vanished so completely, it was like the earth swallowed you. No Instagram posts with your grin on the courthouse steps. No champagne bottles raised high under the camera's flash. No celebratory interviews. Not even a smug quote tweet. You didn't leave a single breadcrumb of satisfaction for them to feed on. You just walked away, quiet, surgical, untouchable. In that way only gods, ghosts, and monsters know how to do. And that's what truly broke them. Because the verdict was one thing, but your silence was another. It wasn't just the wind that haunted them, it was the restraint. Now they don't just remember what you did. They torture themselves wondering what you could have done, if you'd chosen to go further, if you'd chosen cruelty instead of closure, if you'd decided not to be merciful, but merciless. Because the truth is, you had the power to drag their names through the filth until they drowned in it. You had the evidence, the precision, the momentum to humiliate them on a global scale. You could have gone viral, made headlines, turned their shame into a documentary streamed by millions. You could have reduced their reputation to ashes on every screen in the country, but you didn't. And that choice, that quiet refusal, is what terrifies them most. Because it proved you weren't even interested in revenge anymore. You were operating on prophecy. Now they talk about you the way people talk about unsolved crimes, the way people whisper about ghost stories when the lights are out. You are the mystery that lingers in their lungs. You were the one who walked in quiet as air and left with the whole house burning behind you. They can't comprehend it, so they invent excuses. They swear you had help. They swear there's no way it was just you. They build elaborate conspiracies to shield themselves from the truth. They must have had a judge on the inside. Nobody's that good without powerful backing. There's no way they figured it out by themselves. Because the alternative that you stood alone, that you sat silently studying, learning, absorbing, and then executed with precision, so sharp it sliced their legacy in half. That reality is too terrifying to face. So they create myths, conspiracies, shadows to hide under, but the truth doesn't bend. You did it alone, and that makes you the most frightening kind of human alive. Someone they tried to destroy, who learned everything in silence, said nothing, and then walked away while they crumbled into dust. Now your name itself is a curse. It doesn't just live in their mouths, it lives in their bloodstream. It pulses in their nervous system. It's the shiver crawling up their spine when they hear footsteps at night. It's the sweat on their palms when the phone rings unexpectedly. It's the knot in their chest every time they see a sealed envelope with their name on it. Your silence lives rent-free in their heads, and your absence stomps louder than their presence ever could. They don't even speak of you openly anymore. They whisper, they shift eyes, they trade stories like black market goods, passing your name like contraband. And worst of all, they've turned you into a warning for their children. They tell bedtime cautionary tales masked as morals but soaked in fear. Be kind to people. You never know who's building a case in silence. Don't underestimate the quiet ones, because they'll be the ones who rewrite the ending. You became the ghost in their family tree, the shadow stretching across generations, the reason their children inherit paranoia instead of pride. You didn't just destroy them, you cursed them. You became the eternal whisper, the phantom presence at their dinners, the invisible guest at their reunions. You don't need to be there. The echo of what you did is enough. Every laugh at those gatherings cracks under the weight of your memory. Every toast tastes bitter because your name sits unsaid between clinking glasses. They thought they were writing you out of history, but what they actually did was tattoo your story onto their future. And here's the cruelest mercy. You let them live. You let them breathe. You left them with their own shame. And in sparing them, you handed them the worst punishment of all, knowing that the one they mocked, doubted, and dismissed as powerless was the one who took everything and said nothing. That's the punishment that doesn't fade. It doesn't expire. It doesn't heal. It just grows heavier with time, pressing down on their bones every morning, haunting them every night. You didn't just leave them ruined. You left them with a legend they'll never outlive. And now you're not just a person in their memory. You're a myth etched into their bloodstream, an unspoken law, a holy warning. Watch the quiet ones, fear the silent ones, respect the underestimated ones, because you are living proof that the quiet ones are the storm. Respect the joker types, the ones who smile when everything burns. You weren't a person to them, you were punishment wrapped in poise. The debt they forgot existed until it kicked their door off the hinges. You turned family betrayal into divine calculation. And now people who've never even met you treat your legend like law. They don't know your face, they don't know your voice, but they know the impact. You became the phantom of consequence, the haunting, what if that lingers in their minds. But you won't return. You don't need to. You already finished them. And the cruelest sentence of all was letting them live with what they did to themselves. You never needed vengeance. You were vengeance. Your name isn't etched in trophies. It's carved into fear, into whispers, into the paranoia that shadows them forever. You're no longer a cautionary tale. You're the blueprint, the origin story for every quiet, underestimated soul ready to rise. Now every courtroom carries your ghost. Every defense attorney feels that chill, wondering, what if this is another one of them? Because once was tragedy, twice is prophecy. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me to trust you even when evidence is unseen. Let me believe in your everlasting presence, knowing you will never harm me. I know your thoughts toward me are for prosperity, not destruction, to give me hope and a future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always hearing my voice. I lift this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am deeply grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this message spoke to you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need encouragement. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you're preparing for your own triumphant return. And if you'd like to support our work, please